All right, folks, we are live. Let me get a chance to say. I'm gonna need to poll you guys today, if that's cool. And I did just see that locals went live. It took a little bit to get going. I think I'm gonna poll you. Maybe we'll do like an informal thing, and then maybe more something a little bit more formal. Okay. Because I would like to know whether or not you guys would enjoy something. And I'm wondering if there's room in this space, something like this. And I think maybe there is. But I almost do nothing. Certainly nothing business related. Um what the hell is this? I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not advertising on X. I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe need to look into that. Um but yeah, this is unique. It is certainly unique, and it's a little bit stunning that something like this has not been done before. It's kind of crazy. But here we are in 2025, and it does not exist. All right? So while I am sharing some stuff, yep, we'll do it. We'll talk about it more in a hot second. In the meantime, let's get the party started here. Super low. Get it started. Turn it up a little. Shouldn't get right into that though. We'll get into that in a second. Did I make a member only? I don't know. I think they're wrong. Tens probably. Or not probably. Ba-da-dum-bow. All right, welcome folks inside the numbers. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Of course, if you like the videos, don't forget to like them and share them far and wide. I did the mirror correctly. Of course, because the boom is there, you can't actually see it, which is kind of weird. Let's get rid of some of this other stuff that's slowing us down a little bit. There's a bunch of stuff that I really wanted to show you guys, and that's going to slow us down if I drag it in, but I feel like we need to look at it. So it is April, of course, and every time we have an election, we go through this bit of a charade where everyone, I mean, look, if we're being honest, a lot of people follow the polls, and they follow the polls that they like because they want the polls to affirm what they believe or what they want to be true. And that is something the industry is supposed to be trusted to ignore. Unfortunately, it hasn't, and it has fueled it. It has fueled it. So 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months after an election, the industry, and by the way, not just any election, another failure, subsequent and consequential failure. They just keep going as if there weren't these widespread failures. Because the polling was better in 2024 does not mean that it was good, and does not mean that pollsters have addressed these failures. In fact, for the vast majority of pollsters, they may have been closer, but they all exhibited the same kinds of systemic flaws and failures that we have been seeing that have gotten particularly worse in the Trump era. When I was coming up, and I got to tell you this bit of a story here. When I was coming up, you had like Murray, who would conduct the Edison, or he was the director of it. who would conduct the Edison Research exit poll that the election consortium, the media election consortium, would use. And they'd all pool in. I think it was like, we bought it once, $40,000, something like that. At least it was back then. And, everybody would pool so they could get access to Edison's research. Now, obviously, they share that space with AP Votecast, who does things differently and is trying to do, they're stating that they're trying to do stuff better. For the most part, the Votecast last year was better, but I'm getting, I'm getting ahead of myself. When I was coming up, it was already a recognized problem that certain groups were not speaking to pollsters and that response rates were declining precipitously. And moving forward, there were questions about whether or not the consortium should really continue. But unfortunately, it's a business and people are making money off it. So anytime you're talking about giving up, if they get the API along with it, it could be $120,000, $150,000. You're doing good if you're Edison. And even if it's only every 2 and 4 years, you have a gig to conduct mass polling across the country. They're going to pool their resources together when the major media and corporate legacy, media outlets are going to pool and give you every dollar that you want in order to conduct this project. An exit poll in the state of Arizona that I did for somebody last year cost about $20,000. All right. Just to give you guys an idea. Polling at this point, if you want to do it, and there's a lot we can talk about. It's some shows an hour seems like it's not enough, but there's really only a few ways to respond to these issues that Murray even and many others had identified, and they were very short to do it. They were very they were very late to do it, and now they fell short again in their attempt to make those changes. But you start to wonder whether or not those changes are really honest changes or whether they're doing it for show. And in some cases, talking to other pollster friends of mine, it's very clear that people were trying to get out. And this is not legacy polling only. This is not exclusive to legacy media and university polling. They were putting out the same data sets, guys, and pretending like they were giving they were pretending as if they were giving new information. Maybe they would stay in the field for a day or two, collect a few hundred more responses, and include that and say, it's a brand new updated poll without saying that it was a rolling average or something like that, like we have done in the past, by the way. We have done rolling averages. Like, look, we're collecting, 300 or 400 a night, and we're adding it to the rolling average. And most times it's even more than that, obviously, right? And it takes a long time to get that product together and to get it to a place where you guys can digest it. But even though, I would say over the last 4 years, I've given some people accolades for attempting to, or at least appear to be attempting to make those changes, they haven't really done it in an honest way. Response rates fall. The only thing you can really do is increase your sample. That's it. That's all. And then, of course, there's a lot more to do with how you're going to weight, and that's a separate conversation. But the only thing you can do is increase your sample in the hope. And there is another argument about something else. I just don't agree with it, so I'm not going to bring it up here. But in the hope that you can achieve a more representative sample by simply speaking to more people. But here's the problem. And this is something that I think is an honest problem that the industry has had difficulty accepting, because it goes against everything that you learn when you are hopefully becoming proficient in statistics. And I tell you this all, I got a little saying, I got a little catchphrase, and I tell you this all the time. And I know people who hear it and go cringe because they think it violates the laws of nature, but it is a reality. Different groups responded to traditional methods of polling at different rates. So it perverted the principles of randomization. So we add more data collection modes on top of larger samples. And what we find is that different groups are still responding at different rates to these different methods. So now you have to figure out How am I going to reach a representative sample, or how am I going to obtain a representative sample if I don't know what share of the entire sample should be this mode or that mode, right? And some of these people, like Marist and others, attempted this year to dive into that space when they really hadn't in the past. And you could see it was complete amateur hour. They failed to block survey forwarding in both their Sun and Rust Belt polls, which included multiple states in each region. They were made aware of it, and instead acknowledging that they did something wrong, and at the very least, release a caveat saying it has been brought to our attention that we failed to correctly block survey forwarding, which would lead to the tainting of the sample. Why? Because I could just send it to you and all my like-minded friends, and we could blow it up and pollute the poll. It's not representative anymore. It doesn't matter whether or not, they needed more men, and because that guy sent it to his friends at work, they got like another 10 completes from his group. That's not how this works. Obviously, he's going to send a like-minded people. It is going to be a tainted sample. And of course, no surprise, they were wrong. And they were, again, all wrong in the same direction. Yet these people are being presented still as experts. I commented on something. I mean, it's relevant to the discussion. I know he's under crunch. I was going to bring someone on to talk about something that was released. I think I'm just going to wait before bringing this guy on to actually go through the work. But I think he made a lot of really good points in it. But maybe 30 minutes before being done with what we were going to talk about today, I see a post, and it's concerning to me on a whole new level, because this cycle that we're constantly going through is a cycle that is typically fueled by interested parties in these corporate and legacy media structures and spaces, and they're propping up people who are not good at their jobs and don't know what they're doing. And if they do know what they're doing, it's even worse. Because I would argue now the evidence is so clear. It's so clear. We're not talking about a cycle or two. We're not really talking about, this guy made this argument, or this group of pollsters made this argument, and they outperformed us once. Let's wait and see if they're going to do it again. And then if they do, we'll take it as evidence that we're probably doing something wrong. No. This is now repeated. And it's that alone in itself is evidence that they are doing it with intent. So people doing that, we certainly can't hold up as experts. People who don't know how to correctly block survey forwarding, we cannot hold up as experts. But we would almost expect, given how disgusting and corrupt and dishonest they are, for the legacy media to do it. The problem is that we are seeing this very same thing happen now in alternative and new emerging media. So what these people are effectively doing is rendering all of the work that people like myself and others have been doing for years. They're rendering it, I don't want to say, it's not, it's not moot, because they're not that strong. But their viewers, we're going to have to you understand what I'm saying? Fill in the blank with the expletive. We're now going to go them, because these new people and new creators are coming into the space and doing the same thing that legacy media does. But it's a difficult question. Can we take any of these guys or women as experts? There's not too many of them left anymore. Kellyanne Conway doesn't really poll. Ann Seltzer disgraced herself. It is a boys' club. There's no doubt. Now, this is not an explicitly male-dominated industry, but once upon a time it was. Which is why Ann Seltzer, by the way, used to get so much praise. It's not, she was thought to have been credible and good at her job, but also in recognition that this is truly, or when she was coming up, a male-dominated industry, and it is very hard for a woman to make their bones in it. Especially in that time. Now it doesn't matter. I would hope if there was a female version of the People's Pundit and they outperformed the competition cycle after cycle, that it really wouldn't matter. But when she was coming up, it is true, and it's worth recognizing that it did matter. It was a boys' club. All right. Because, back to the central question, you have people who are doing stuff wrong, right? And then there's a separate element to this question because it deals with public trust or distrust in the industry. Someone who is presented as a polling expert by media, merging, or legacy, I'm not saying it has to, but it should be somebody who has a public persona. George Gallup had a public persona. Before the era of social media, George Gallup had a public persona. There was a face to the Gallup name. Back then, a little bit more than half, actually, of the American public used to trust his results. We settled into like a 45 to 50% range for a very long time. Today, that number sits around 1 in 5 who trust the results of polls. This is really problematic if you believe George's argument. And I do, and I always have. That as we get bigger and move into new ages, he was way ahead of his time. You almost can't have a representative government, as we claim to have, without a credible polling industry. You can't. Is every congressman or woman going to put their, lick their finger and put it in the air and be able, like Nostradamus, to accurately gauge which way the wind is blowing? Like, they're not going to be able to do that. So they either vote how they want to vote and then find out on election day, or there are trusted public experts who tell them what people think, and that maybe doesn't always drive their decision making, but it certainly helps. When you take billions, not millions, billions of dollars out of the private sector, and put it towards public sector ventures, you better be doing it with good information. And what am I referring to? I'm saying when you call up Richard and Elizabeth Uihlein, if you're a Republican, and you say, Rick, give me $5 million. Here's what my poll says. I can win this race. Okay? You just took $5 million out of Liz's wallet and her bank account, Rick's bank account, that they could have used. In case you don't know, I know that the left demonizes this couple. They do a remarkable amount of philanthropy and other stuff. You just took $5 million away from, I don't know, St. Jude's? I don't know. And maybe Shriners, actually. I don't remember. You just took $5 million away from a business that could have hired somebody. Right? And instead you put it into this world where there are a bunch of slimy consultants. And ultimately, the decisions or the conclusions that those slimy consultants come to, they then translate, they become decisions made by public officials. And then that directs policy, which of course influences the direction the country goes. And by the way, it's taking money out of the real economy to do so. You may, for instance, give the National Republican Senatorial Committee a poll that says Larry Hogan has a snowball's chance in hell of becoming the next senator from Maryland because, of course, he's a fat slob of a popular once governor. And, instead of spending that money wisely elsewhere, you sink it into Larry Hogan's race and Larry gets his ass kicked anyway. It's a waste of resources. And on top of it, it continues to sow public distrust in polling, which I would argue then goes on to hurt democracy or republicanism, small r republicanism, whatever one you call it. Now, we should be a republic. We were established as a republic. The 17th Amendment and the 16th Amendment in one fell swoop, in one hard blow to the chin, knocked the shit out of small r republicanism in this country because it devastated the idea of the separation of powers. It's just the truth. I'm just saying. It also resulted in an explosion in the average tenure in the US Senate, which then led to a matching of increased tenure in the House of Representatives. You can see it. I've mapped it on a chart in a book. It's very obvious, which also increased rent-seeking behavior and a stranglehold that rent seekers had on senators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now here we are. Super powerful K Street and a less representative government. But again, you still need the function of public polling in order to do that. And the public has to trust it. And why? So let me give you an example. If liberals are told by the New York Times that Hillary Clinton, we've crunched the numbers. Don't worry, we're experts, okay? And by the way, go look at this other so-called expert. His name is Nate Silver. He's not really a narrative pushing piece of shit. He's an expert, okay? And look, he gave us an A rating. And we're telling you, because we're so smart, and we're backed by other smart people and super, super other smart gurus, they also tell us we're right, okay? Just listen. Hillary Clinton's going to win this election, 95% chance. The Economist, 99% chance. Not everybody in the country, obviously, is a statistician. But when you tell people that someone has a 95, 99%, even 85% chance that, like Nate Silver did, that this person is going to win the election, and everyone is not like, you may claim to have all these other variables in your so-called models, but nobody buys it. And the only thing you have on your website anyway is a bunch of polls that are all showing a win in the same direction. And then it doesn't happen. What is the result? The result is when the intelligence department, in the intelligence community, pushes a black op on you, or the public, particularly those liberals, or anyone else who is duped by this. And that black op, of course, was Russia collusion, which was also a hoax. Then, of course, it will make sense. Wait a minute. That's right. Hillary had an almost 100% chance of winning the election. Must have been stolen. Donald Trump, this is making sense to me now. Donald Trump colluded with Vladimir Putin. Look, the Washington Post, who also had some really shitty polling, they had a story just the other day. I saw it. Putin hacked the power grid. He got it into the machines. So funny. They all call Mike Lindell a nutcase with the machines. Did you read those stories? As if Putin sends some digital fingerprint through the power grid. Which power grid? What are you talking about? What grid? No, the power grid. Okay. Oh, okay. You mean it's so ridiculous. You mean the universal power grid in, like, I don't know, it's in DC or something. I don't know. I missed the exit for the power grid off 295. Laura. I've been on that circle a lot, man. I know. But to them, it makes sense because it's plausible now. Now you're helping me make sense of the world because everything said that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And of course, everything really was the polls and a bunch of shitty people who were trying to interpret a bunch of garbage data. But it led to this false certainty that never was there. And by the way, Hillary Clinton was always the underdog in that election by actual polling that was right, and by the other variables that we use as predictive indicators for elections. It is very tough to maintain control of the White House, for instance, after 2 consecutive terms. The economy, no matter what was claimed, was not doing well. And people, their perception, right? Because that's what actually matters, is their perception. And I can go on and on and on. But the bottom line is the only thing that led to that false sense of certainty was very bad polling. And it did massive damage to the country. Massive damage. All right. And I mean, there are many, many more examples. But it opens a door that these dark arts walk through. And the result of that is like, I want to say like the planting of like a little seed, but I want to give you a much more significant picture here. Let's use the word sowing instead. Because we're not just talking about, oh, I planted a seed like it's an avocado tree or something. They're spraying, man. They're sowing seed all over the place. Like they're holding their burlap bag and going through the field and sowing these seeds of distrust that can take generations to pull out from the root. And the only way to do that is by having people that people trust to at least do the best job they can, be brought into if any, it's like, so what I guess what I'm arguing here, I'm not guessing, I know what I'm going to argue, is that there is such a thing as an expert. It's just that in this space with so much challenge in front of us, we should be giving people this not with a scepter of authority, you know? So when someone is brought on a show, and I'm going to show you an example in a second here, they shouldn't be given this air, presented to the audience as some competent, trustworthy. I mean, there's different reasons for not being trustworthy, right? I mean, you can be incompetent or you could just be dishonest. And it's not honest at all, in fact, of us to argue that dishonesty is not playing a role in the collapse of this industry. Just because like 3 of us got it right in 24 does not mean this industry is on a way to correction. Because several people, like Patrick Murray from the Monmouth poll, consistently got things wrong and again, all in one direction. Or Ann Seltzer, who very clearly, doesn't matter what, we've told this inside story, multiple inside stories about Ann Seltzer. I'm not going to rehash them, but it doesn't really matter what Ann's ultimate motive was. The damage she did is what really matters. And she's out for now and disgraced as a pollster for now. But believe me when I tell you, she will be rewarded handsomely for that. Those are only 2 people. The rest of the industry is consolidating, and they're looking for new people to elevate in order to counter people who are trying to do honest work. And I was hopeful before 24 because I saw, for the longest time, guys, it was just us. This was a one-person show. Nobody else had the balls. Let's just be real. And I like many of them, but their balls were exactly this big. They were the tiniest little bald men on the face of the planet. They didn't have the courage. They didn't have the stomach to take on the Nate Silvers and his fake pollster scorecard with his fake model and his smear merchant behavior. They didn't have the balls to take on Fox News because maybe they were afraid they wouldn't end up on Sean Hannity at 9 o'clock. They didn't have the balls to take on anyone else, not in academia, nothing. When Politico called and asked for a comment about Patrick Murray waiting for party in order to get Hillary Clinton's vote share higher in the state of Pennsylvania, nobody else would talk to them. Nobody. They could find nobody to speak out against when Patrick does it and when other people do it. This was a one-person show. And in 24, it's like, man, maybe this will be contagious. It looks like there's like a group of other people who may try to do the same thing. Now, most of them did not pan out. That's just the truth. And I don't even have to name them. It's just like at some point, I'm not going to give them my audience level So I'm not going to even, name drop anybody, because sometimes even when you're punching down, you wind up helping the person to get up. So I'm just going to leave that, I'm going to leave that alone. But it was at least a hopeful sign. But unfortunately, it's not, in my mind, it's not enough to counter what I'm seeing going on now. And the major issues, again, is that you have all these people being recreated or rebranded and then brought back into the fold. And the industry, the legacy media industry specifically, is consolidating who they are using. It will get more difficult to attack Ipsos. It will get more difficult to attack YouGov. Now, the New York Times, I don't think they're getting back with Sienna. As of right now, ABC, the Washington Post, who fired Gary Langer for correctly telling you Donald Trump was going to win this election, New York Times, ABC, CBS, there's 2 panels that are being used by everybody. And by the way, those panels really, in truth, they're all double, triple, and quadruple dipping, because they're all, except for the Ipsos panel, they have their own thing called the AmeriSpeaks. It's different, AmeriSpeaks, for this area. But for the, YouGov, everyone's dipping in the same marketplace. So I'm concerned that all these experts who already are subject or super, super vulnerable towards a groupthink situation, this groupthink is going to get worse, because they're all dipping into the same marketplaces and they're all going to see the same stuff. They're literally going to be interviewing the same panelists. It's not a good look moving forward. And by the way, I did see a couple of contributions to the Public Polling Project. Thanks for that. I don't know why that's wrong. That's like double the amount. It is. I'm trying to fix it. Remember when they did that update and added campaigns, which I was thrilled, and I am still thrilled with. I just haven't gotten to it yet. For some reason, it's taking those 2 forms and combining the amount together. If we fail to hit the thing, the target on a prior poll, it should not be carried over. So when I'm looking and I'm seeing, and I'll look right now and I'll tell you guys right now, we are like, it says like 25% of our goal. Okay. We're actually technically more than that. I just have to suck it up. So for instance, the one prior to that was about 40% underfunded. So it's rolling it. All right. It's kind of funny. There's no doubt that the donation base is spreading, which is a good sign. It's a very good sign. I just don't know why this is happening with this. I don't know why this is rolling it over. So we'll see. We're really closer than it looks. We're not as close as I'd like to be, but we're closer than it looks. I got to fix that, because it's looking like an astronomical amount of money, and it's not. And that may be part of the reason why it's not funded yet. I don't know, but it's got to get fixed. And we did put in a request to figure out what the hell to do with this. All right. But let's play this clip first. All right. I wanted to lay all that out. And I know it was maybe a little bit, at the risk of being a little bit boring, but I thought like you guys should know all of the different facets to this conversation, elements to this conversation, because it's not just, oh, do we know this guy and the industry knows this guy and he's super smart and let's bring him on this new show. There's multiple problems with that. Number one is, and let's just play it. I'll shut up and I'll explain it after. Sorry to do this to you again, Mark, but you literally gave me an example 30 minutes before the show, bro.
2 slides. We do quick, and then Doug can comment. First, the electorate in 2024 was 6% less Democratic than compared to 4 years ago. Is that kind of shift in one cycle significant or unusual?
Well, the shift is significant, but more important than anything else is I can't remember the last time that people who voted on election day, the majority, a plurality of them were Democrats. It shows a real erosion for the Democratic Party, as I showed you earlier on the 6 million people who voted. The gap between the Harris vote compared to Biden, those were disproportionately Democrats who didn't show up.
Okay, stop. First of all, there are actually there's 3 ones from the start of it. There are 3 things immediately very wrong with the content that's being shown to viewers in that small little snippet. Maybe we got through 30% of what I want to show you. One is, who's Doug Sosnick? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller. Ferris Bueller. You don't know. Most of the world doesn't know. Most people who follow politics don't know. If you're in the industry, you may know that he is a longtime Democratic strategist. All right. What did Doug's polling show going into the 24 election? Let's see. To gauge his accuracy, maybe, and whether or not he knows what he's doing. I don't know, because it doesn't exist. All right. It doesn't exist for you as Johnny Q and Sally Q public to go look at to say, let's see, does this guy have a firm grip on what's going on here? Because Exhibit A, his national poll was right. Exhibit B, his Pennsylvania poll was correct. Okay. So here we're being presented with an expert you cannot identify. Again, I will bring up the fact that everyone and literally their grandmother knew who George Gallup was in 1960s America. Okay. Everyone. Okay. They knew. Secondly, what they're showing you on the screen right there is the CNN exit poll. Once again, exit polls are flawed. To draw conclusions from exit polls is kind of dangerous. Like big conclusions is kind of dangerous. Which brings us to number 3, because he did it using flawed data. There is this argument, and I touched on this yesterday a little bit for the members only show, or whatever. It wasn't even a show, it was a stream. There is a video going around. Ayad, you sent it to me yesterday morning, I think. And this is an individual who was interviewed by the New York Times, and his name is David Shore, and he's a co-founder of this very large Democratic strategist firm. Okay, and the industry definitely knows him for sure. I mean, there's no doubt. But he is making the case that guys like this, they're just 100% incorrect. And he's right. David Shore is right about that. How did David Shore come to the conclusion about what that statement this man just made is incorrect? Is by conducting what I understand is an obscene amount of interviews. He may be the only other person on planet Earth to conduct more interviews than the People's Pundit for the 2024 election. I'm not sure what time span he was giving, but if that number is accurate, then he actually conducted more interviews than us. Every year, it's not even close. We conduct more interviews than any other pollster. It's not close because we have minimum sample size requirements that other pollsters don't use. And because when you see a number in our polling, and most of you who followed me a long time know what I'm about to say, and I come out with, let's say, 3,000 registered voters. Rest assured, we technically did speak to more than that, but the sample that is being provided to you is the final product. So maybe we spoke to 440 African Americans in total. They are weighted down to their proper share of that 3,000 sample, but it doesn't mean we only spoke to 3,000 voters. We do things differently than other people. It's part of the reason why I think we're better. They are just weighted from 440 or 450 to, let's say, 300 so that it's 10% of the sample. Okay? That isn't how other people do it. They just don't. So we actually do speak to more. The bottom line is he's making these assumptions off of exit polls, which are conducted, and they are very large sample studies. And I wouldn't say very large, but they're large sample studies, certainly larger than pre-election media polls, the vast majority of them. However, there's a reason there's a vote cast, guys. There's myriad issues with how the Edison Research exit poll is conducted. The director of it, like I was saying before, has the Bush v. Kerry election was the first time I heard him get very vocal over it. We have a major problem here. John Kerry was clearly the winner in our exit polling. We were absolutely wrong. John Kerry wasn't. By the way, what happened that year? To my earlier point, it fueled conspiracy theories on behalf of Democrats again that George Bush stole Ohio, because if you looked at Edison Research's work, it was statistically impossible in order for John Kerry to lose the state of Ohio. Well, of course, that's ludicrous. It didn't stop Barbara Boxer from submitting it as evidence to not seat the electors, because they, of course, did challenge you. You understand what I'm saying correctly? A senator from California used an exit poll as justification not to seat electors from the state of Ohio. In the year 2024, people were arrested for that, by the way. Anywho, there are large samples, but there's myriad issues that have been raised about why they're not good. All right. Vocast has a lot of contradictory information compared to, not, they all have results that are contradictory, but I'm saying they contradict each other on a number of findings. One of them, which is very big, by the way, is on this issue of who voted on election day versus who didn't. And then also, had the electorate been X, had the electorate been Y, what would that have meant for the outcome? I'm going to say this very, very clearly, because what he just said is false. If more people would have showed up to vote in 2024, Donald Trump would have won the election by an even larger margin. An even larger margin. We can disagree on what that margin would be based on the results of our own findings, but it is not in dispute. This is novel, because typically it was always the other way around. The world is inside out. It's upside down. The registered voter population is significantly more Trumpy than the likely voter population. We're not used to that, but that is a fact, an indisputable fact. Harris did not lose this election because turnout was down nationally from 2000. She lost the election because it was a traditional increase from a midterm turnout to a presidential turnout. And also, I will point out that it is only true that turnout was down nationally because some of the bigger states, but it is not true that turnout collapsed in battleground states. And that's why Harris lost the election. We could go through them one by one right now. We have done this in the past. In the state of Michigan, Donald Trump got more people out and he won by a larger margin. Turnout was gangbuster in the states of Pennsylvania, in the states of Arizona, in Nevada. It is not because there were all these Democratic voters that didn't show up. Had those voters showed up, she'd have lost even worse. Nationally, it would have been an exaggerated effect, because some of the biggest swings that we saw were among groups that aren't really represented in the Electoral College. We have focused on two groups predominantly, especially in the Trump era: white, educated women in the suburbs and the white working class. Rui Teixeira, by the way, we read, I don't know how many articles he wrote on the Liberal Patriot explaining Democrats are going to lose. Kamala Harris is going to lose. In California, in Texas, in Florida, in New York, in New Jersey, we saw groups such as newly naturalized immigrants, young voters between the ages of 18 and 24, swing massively to Donald Trump. Massive. And if that was duplicated across the nation and turnout returned to what he's talking about, Trump would have won the election by at least, only in the popular vote, he would have won the national popular vote by at least 3 points. And there's an argument that he could have won it by upwards of 6. That is a comfortable win. By the way, it's right in the range of his margin in our polling when we would show you the difference between likely voter, registered voter, unlikely voter. Do you remember? Because it may have been hard for us to digest before the election, but it nevertheless is true that the registered eligible voting population, the VEP, the voting eligible population, is significantly more Trumpy than it is among the likely voter population or the actually voted population. Harris could have won if the electorate looked like 2022 or if it looked like 18. There's a path there. In 18, I would argue there's a greater path. And in fact, we would show you this all the time. This is what the vote is among the 16 electorate, 18 electorate, 20 electorate, 22 electorate, and what we project to be the 24. So that's a pretty big oopsie, like whatever you want to call it. So that's a pretty big false claim that he just made. All right, let's get back to it and finish the rest. I can't believe we're already almost to 3 o'clock. I'm going to have to break this down into a number of other series. And that's good because I'm going to try to get you a guest for Friday to talk about something that piggybacks off of this. And I don't mean to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's like they're just doing this. And then there's more media again, as if there wasn't a 16, as if there wasn't an 18, as if there wasn't a 20. And now again, a 24. What they had a few little bright patches in 2022. So it suddenly meant they were fixed. They're not fixed. And yet we just continuously roll on as if like, here's Trump's approval in the latest YouGov poll that is released like every 2 days now. Who gives a shit? Why are we talking about YouGov? They haven't polled an election correctly since I don't know. Reuters sucks. They were on the worst pollster of 2020 list and again made the list this year. Who cares what Reuters says? And Marist and Quinnipiac and this one and that one. Who gives a damn? Why are you elevating these people? And you'd expect the New York Times to do it. You'd expect even Fox News to do it. You expect CNN to do it, MSNBC, because like I said in the very beginning of this episode, I don't care if you're a viewer at home or you're the producer on like some CNN show, which I don't even know, I don't even watch, but you know what I mean. You're digesting polls, most of you, not all of you, and certainly not my audience, but like most are digesting polls because they want, and they are selective, because they want a pollster to tell them good news. Give me the good news, man. Give me the gospel. Affirm what I believe, please. It seems like we're the only one in the business of passing on the legit word of the American public. It's kind of sad. Even so-called trustworthy and high quality and good reputation pollsters on the right, like Tony Fabrizio, have no problem putting out bullshit so they can raise more money. It's tragic. But for the love of God, new media space, don't do it too. You have no idea how catastrophic it is to our society, to our political stability. You're literally killing us. You're freaking killing us. You just got this platform. That's my daughter. You just got this platform. And you're going to get up already. Do the same shit. Why would anybody watch you on YouTube? And I don't mean Mark. I'm not picking on Mark here. But I'm saying like before Mark and others do this, think for a second. Do you think you have a reliable business model here if your business model is to mimic big media over the election mafia shit? Is that the appropriate use of the trust people just gave you? Come on.
Right.
On the polls.
Okay. Next two slides. Also, problems for Democrats. Lowest net favorable rating since the 90s. What do you think's driving that? Why are Democrats so relatively unpopular?
Well, I mean, it's because I think there's a perception that we as a party drove we had the worst inflation in America since the early 1980s. I think people basically everything on election day was on average 20% higher than when Biden took office. And so I think it was economic, and I think that there was a concern that people, for their own personal safety and security, and I think the immigration issue was sort of both a real problem for Democrats, but also was a proxy for just a general sense that there was a lawlessness with the Democratic administration and these big cities around America that were largely governed by Democrats. And lastly, though, a sense that Democrats were cultural elites
Yeah.
on how they talked, issues they cared about, all the DEI programs.
There you go.
And so essentially, I think the vast majority, a lot of people in America in the middle of the country thought Democrats were looking down on them.
Okay, there it is. Now that's closer. That's much closer. So, people always say, Rich, why do you start the show on this day and then you go live on a 6 p.m. on a Tuesday? I cannot tell you two things. One is how much work there is to be done to understand what happened, but what is going on in this country. And there's a big problem, by the way, with what research right now. Trump's voters, these certain groups particularly that, we highlighted all throughout the election year, they kind of came out of nowhere. And I was very concerned that they would vanish again after the election. I mean, vanish from our radar, from our ability to speak to them, and you could see it already happening before the election in the final couple of weeks. And we told you this. They were telling you participation rates among this group are down. So many of those under 40 black men that fueled Donald Trump's numbers in some of these battleground states, double digits and beyond. I mean, in Texas, you're talking about 30%. I mean, it's insane. In Florida, you're talking about 22%. By the way, Ryan Gradusky, I was right about the Florida black share of the vote, so fuck you. But I was concerned these people, they came out of nowhere, guys. We would know who it is we've spoken to, the kind of person that's making up these samples and subgroups, these, whether it's Black American or Hispanic. These were people who just all of a sudden started to participate in polls and tell us, this is what I think. They had reasons for not doing it before. They don't care. They don't think the system can be fixed. My vote doesn't count. My mommy tells me I should be, my grandma and my auntie telling me I should be a Democrat. So I'm whispering to you on the phone right now, I'm voting for Donald Trump. These people have vanished. And I am almost certain that is actually part of the reason his approval rating has declined. You can see it. The I never voted until 2024 has shrunk dramatically in the last 2 months. They're just gone again. And there's a lot to be done. Going back to what I'm saying, it's hard to do in this environment. It's taking a lot of time. And we're essentially, I mean, I should convert the polling part of this business into a friggin' charity case at this point. I'm not kidding. Because it's just so much. And the left they operate very differently. They'll write a check. They will give you anything that you ask for, as long as you give them the numbers that they want or can live with. You saw Nate Cohen contort himself into this intellectual pretzel with his final round of polls because he was trying to do that. And that's the way, that's expected behavior in this industry among the left at this point. This is what is expected of a pollster. On the right, There's just they don't see the value. They just want to bitch about how inaccurate polls are, but they don't see the value in it, and they too would rather just pay for a poll that's going to get the fundraisers to give, to make a last push and bring in another 5 million in the last week of a campaign. Like that's what we saw in Florida. That's a perfect example. And then for someone who's trying to do it for not for either side, for someone who's trying to do it for public consumption, there's just no avenues. Most people sadly have sold themselves to somebody and you just don't know about it. And it's true. And man, I hate to say it, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I mean, I'm telling you, where do you think they're getting the money to poll like this? It's not cheap. And in fact, it's getting more expensive. All right. So, I mean, it's so complicated. It can't be answered in a simple way like that. It was inflation and it was immigration. We're in beyond that kind of stuff at this point. This youth voter phenomena, the 18 to 24, Yale's just now discovering it. Last week, they figured it out. Okay. But so many others. And you can see David Shore in that interview try to speak about it. Even he is like, look, there's a lot more research that needs to be done. We're into an explanation already that we think we're onto something, which is that Laura and I were she walked away a second ago. Otherwise, I'd bring her in here to talk about it. But when we asked these people, particularly the 18 to 24-year-olds who are significantly more conservative than any age group, 18 to 24-year-old age group we have ever seen in our lifetime, by the way. When we asked them about the beliefs of their parents, something interesting happens. And then we went and started to look at statistics about who really was getting married over the last 40, not 40 years, but like I'm, for instance, and I thought I was 44. I'm super stoked. I had a brain glitch. I'm 43, baby. I'm not going to be 44 until October. Yes. One more, baby. So anyway, I'm not liking getting older. You won't either, kids. You won't either. But it made sense. The findings suddenly made sense when I thought back on my own childhood. Okay. A lot of my friends who did not maybe make all the best decisions, and Lord knows I have, and I almost ruined my life, as you guys know. But there was a certain kind of people who did have children and who did stay married, and they lived through periods of dramatic or significant milestones in this country. And this new younger generation, no doubt there's some influence of their parents' teachings, but I think it's more than that. And because you'll see David Shore talk about, well, it's social media and they're not watching CNN anymore and they don't care what the celebrities say anymore. And we've talked about this before, and I think that's part of it. I'm coming, Pumpkin. I love you. I will come. I promise. I'm coming. I promised her last week that I would pick her up from school. It's the only day where she doesn't have something and, pick up from her daddy. That's what she wants. But there you go. Look, it is that they're not watching that and they're watching social media and the influencers that are on social media. I told you, like Elon Musk is cool to younger voters. My kids, even though they hate it, like they'll get memes or video clips, shorts or something, and they're like, "Hey, Nick, this your dad? He's funny." He's like, "Oh, like they." But those kids aren't digesting that stuff. But also, too, my son is never going to fall for an Iraq war scam because, of course, his parents did. Then we had the Great Recession, and they were disproportionately harmed by government programs that were supposed to be noble programs, right? And then we had, and it's all this stuff that culminates with what? COVID. One of the biggest scams that hurt them very badly. Hurt their parents badly. So I think there's a little bit of natural selection going on. And I'm serious. I don't know how else to characterize it. one side maybe got a hold of institutions that exerted influence, applied influence to younger generations, and it worked for a little bit, but maybe it always was going to be fleeting and temporary, fleeting, because you cannot sustain your grip on younger generations, most of yours, right? If you're not staying married. If you're, and look, there are divorces that work out and the family's perfectly fine. Everyone handles it like mature adults. But again, I'm a statistician and I speak in generalities. So forgive me if I insult you. It's just true. And so many of the friend groups that would have maybe been perfect examples of raise a liberal who's going to run around like a furry and bark in the hallway and scratch at you and shit. Like, this is the stuff my children deal with. Your children, if you have kids my age, are dealing with. And maybe a little bit older than mine, and they were just likely to vote. My son thinks Joe Rogan's hilarious. He loves Donald Trump. He thinks he's the coolest politician ever. He doesn't even view him as a politician. He just does. You know what he doesn't like? To be scratched in the hallway by some nutcase who thinks they're a wild animal. All right? Like, this stuff. There's so much going on. So when we ask these people who their parents said, there at least is on the surface some evidence to suggest that these people are the children of more conservative families who basically kept the family unit together during a very bad period that came after the Cultural Revolution, that they were the children of the Cultural Revolution. And maybe they watched as their families were destroyed by divorce and drug use and whatever it may be. And they raised their kids differently, because there's a lot of similarities, guys, when we ask these kids where they come from. And it's kind of weird because some of them can be educated, and yet there's something going on where they're resisting this indoctrination that hurt so many. I don't want to say hurt, but was successful with so many other youth generations before. And all of this matters so much and is so significant because this happens a lot when a party wins. The wrong people get credit, and the ignorant people get to decide what direction it's going. And I'm telling you, if I was a Republican strategist or whatever, not even, and I was a Republican who had a outsized influence on the direction the party went, I would say, let's trade some of these short-term losses among seniors 65 and above, particularly 65 to 74. Let's trade some of that for making sure that we are what these younger people expected us to be. Because guess what? Overly educated, Valium addicted, wine drinking, suburban house women, not even housewives, suburban women, career women, are not a growing population. You know who is? Right. There's 40, 60 years of votes there compared to maybe another 20 to 40 years of votes for a smaller segment of the electorate. Like, my point is, being the party of fast-growing non-white younger groups and white groups that are declining in higher education rates is not a bad thing to be. So what? You may be underperform in special elections and in midterms for the foreseeable 2 cycles, maybe. And then you dominate like the Roosevelt Coalition for 40 years. But because, again, this is all back to the same thing the whole point of this was on, and I do have to wrap it up. Yet another reason why bad polling is so catastrophic. Presenting people as polling experts, whether you're doing it to the public and hurting public trust, or you're doing it to politicians, to government policy makers, and you're hurting the direction of the country, or you're presenting it to party royalty and you're influencing the direction the parties are going to go. It is very important for us to start recognizing that maybe there aren't such a, maybe we don't have to toss the expert title out of the window for this industry, but we should hold it with very selectively and with a little bit of humility, because it's a statistical certainty, for instance, that I'm eventually going to be wrong. I cannot keep this up forever. Although George Gallup did, with the exception of Truman, Dewey. Even George Gallup got it wrong. And it was super easy to poll compared to today, back then. All right. All right. All right. I guess I'm going to have to kick rocks here and go get my girl. I don't want to keep her waiting. But don't forget, if you like the videos, to like them and share them far and wide. Of course, the best place to subscribe is on Locals. Become a supporter, peoplespundit.locals.com. There it is, peoplespundit.locals.com. And YouTube, if you're a YouTube member, we, of course, appreciate that. There is, however, that discount code, fed all the way down, go through the book club stuff. Somebody needs to give me a damn post-it to pin a new code up on the community section. But yeah, you could swap over and get a month free, so you're not like wasting the money that you already paid for a YouTube membership for the month or something if you wanted to. And we have tons of you that really subscribe to both, and we know you're doing it to support us, and we love you for it. Really do. The public polling project is very, 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 very important. So share it, contribute to it, do what you can. Let's try to get it to at least 60% of the goal, for the love of God, because this polling quarter is extremely important for us. I have no doubt, gets significantly easier to fund as we get through this one. All right, because of the exposure that it is going to get that we have not gotten in the past. Okay. All right. 3:15. I got to kick rocks. Otherwise, she'll be waiting at the front until all those buses go, and I'll feel bad. So with that in mind, I'm out. Yeah. Don't forget, as always, as Laura always says, deuces. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and have a great rest of your day. Wednesday. Posto, I believe, tomorrow morning. Yeah. I'll get it for you. I'll put it out on social media. But I believe Posto tomorrow morning. All the best, guys.